Hello, humans! So, I took out my camera to randomly record me talking about this fantasy world that I came up with. Well, at least just a little bit, because I'm writing it into a book and I don't want to spoil anything. So, for the past 7 years or so, I have been developing a world called Vael. It's a fantasy world. I've mentioned it in my documentary, and I really like it. But I'm biased, because it's my world, I guess. And how do I describe it? It's sort of a mix between, like, medieval style fantasy and sort of anime style fantasy, if that makes sense. But when I draw the characters, I usually draw them in anime style, because I really like the style. A lot of the medieval stuff, like the medieval style fantasy that would show in some of the architecture, depending on the location, and the anime style would show maybe more in the characters. Some of them have funky hair colors. There are people from the moon. You have like normal races, like fantasy races, like humans, elves. I'm still kind of developing a few other ones. And then there's like some weird ones like moon folk, and those are the people from the moon, in case you didn't know. And then there's sort of this demon type race. They're not actual demons, that's what I've been naming them, because I haven't really had a name for them. They're typically a very devious kind of race though. Oh, and beast elves. Kind of like regular elves, but a little fluffier. So, that's a little bit about the world. But the plot it's really hard for me to describe it. I tend to write tons of stuff down before I can summarize it. So like, I would probably not be able to summarize it until the book is nearly finished. But the best way I can sum it up is the main character, Lucia. She is... well, I can't really spoil what her race is. Because I don't want to spoil too much of the story. But the basic premise is that Lucia's sort of this person who's in her own little world, and she's a little bit ditzy. And then she gets infected with this disease called the Shadow Mark, which ends up being widespread. It's this complex disease that targets your fears, and it gets worse the more you're like focused on it, if that makes sense. It's like the more fearful you feel, the more it progresses. And so through that, Lucia learns how to, over time, control her emotions, because she's actually a very unbalanced person. She's very much like an Aspie, which is why I like her so much and why I relate to her. I've basically taken a bunch of stuff from my brain and my personality and put it into Lucia. So I hope it's a book that all of you guys can enjoy if you like very Aspie-like people. So yeah, that's a bit about Vael. And one thing I guess I wanted to mention is that I'm having a really hard time focusing on it, and like the fact that I've been writing it for like, not writing it, but working on it for the past 7 years says something. Yeah, I need to get back to it. I have an outline, kind of. I have to make a lot of changes, but then as I go through the outline, I keep finding little things and asking myself questions like, wait, what's the origin of this race? How did it come to be? Or, why does this character act like this? Or, like, basic world stuff. Lots of things that I have to figure out. And it's taken me a long time. And I'm really dragging my feet because I kind of don't really feel very confident in my writing, to be honest, because over time, like, I'm starting to see a trend of me writing less and less and less because I'm trying to do more normal things in life. I used to be completely solitary, and I would draw, I would write, I would play music, I would do all this great stuff. And I look back on it, and it actually was really good stuff. Some of it was, you know, silly, like, childish stuff because I was a child. But a lot of my content that I made, a lot of my stories that I made were actually good. And I'm sort of mourning that right now because I feel like I'm kind of missing that. And I had an original draft of Vael from a long time ago that I found. And I was reading it and I was like, oh, so many feels! It's so good! And yet, it's just, it didn't get finished. It wasn't completed as a story. And so throughout college and classes and teaching myself and all of that, I've learned all of these methods on writing, but the one thing that I keep forgetting is to write like a little kid. It's like you can use all the structured things that you want, you can use all of the methods that you want for productivity, and yet it will never be as good if you're not utilizing your inner child, if that makes sense. Because we try to blend in with society and look like other people and try to be normal, and because probably as kids most of us were, especially if we were really hyperactive. Shut up! My computer was telling me what time it is. I don't need to know. But especially if you were a particularly imaginative, hyperactive, head in the clouds kind of person, your parents or other people probably told you, focus on the now, do your homework, do this, and over time you've been gradually conditioned to put aside your childlike fantasies and focus on the world in front of you, which unfortunately is actually very dismal compared to the wonderful worlds in your brain. So I am sorry if you have been converted to that, if you are creative like me. But yeah, I think I'd like to close this with, please help me. No, I would appreciate just, I guess, a little bit of tips or encouragement if you're going through something similar where you've lost sort of a childlike creativity. How did you get it back? I want to know. Comment below, because I'm feeling really old right now. Also, another thing I would want to say, if you are creative and you are having the same issues that I am having, be like a child. You can act like an idiot, well, just not at work or in front of other people, but embrace that inner child. And I've had to work through so much things, and I realized me growing up has really contributed to my depression and anxiety, and I've had to uncover the fears behind that, and things like me being suppressed and my natural self, my childlike self being suppressed. So don't let the outside world change who you are on the inside, because you're cool and you're important. And yeah, bye.